My mother-in-law called me cheap. She threw the ring I bought for her daughter at my face, so I ended the engagement. And what unfolded after left them speechless. I'm Logan West. I'm 28, a civil engineer based in San Diego. I grew up in a working-class neighborhood where the idea of financial planning wasn't a choice. It was survival. My parents taught me to be practical, to think long-term. My dad used to say, "You either build the foundation right or you spend your whole life patching the cracks." That stuck with me. I never had the flashiest car or the biggest apartment, but I had stability. I took pride in that. I met Natalie 2 years ago at a beach cleanup my friend Jared dragged me to. I was mostly there for the free burritos and a chance to prove I wasn't turning into a total workaholic. But while everyone else was posting selfies and complaining about the heat, I saw her, quiet, focused, tying trash bags with one hand and sketching something on her forearm with a pen using the other. I asked her what she was drawing. She looked up, smiled softly, and said, "A pattern I don't want to forget." Turns out she was a fashion design grad who never got to chase her dream. She worked retail to pay the bills and created magic in her sketchbooks at night. We clicked almost instantly. Natalie was gentle and observant, but she had this fire when she talked about things she loved. She'd go on about fabric texture and runway lighting and the sound shoes made on hardwood floors. I'd listen for hours. There was something incredibly magnetic about her. But early on, she gave me a warning. "My mom," she said one night while we were walking along the cliffs in La Jolla, "is kind of intense." I laughed. "Like what? Super type A?" Natalie gave me this look. Half amused, half sad. "No. Like, if she doesn't approve of something, she'll either ignore it or destroy it." I raised an eyebrow. "You're not exaggerating." She tried to cancel my birthday dinner once because I wore flats instead of heels. I blinked. "That's weird." She just shrugged. "That's Claudia James. She believes every decision reflects back on her reputation, including mine." At the time, I didn't think too much of it. I figured everyone's got complicated family dynamics. I mean, who doesn't have a dramatic aunt or an overbearing mom? But then I met Claudia. It was at her family's annual Founders Brunch, an over-the-top Sunday gathering that looked like it had been ripped out of a luxury lifestyle magazine. Think champagne towers, monogrammed napkins, and a seating chart with calligraphy. When we arrived, Claudia greeted us with a perfectly rehearsed smile and a chilled glass of something that probably cost more than my car payment. She looked me up and down like she was evaluating a house she wasn't sure she wanted to buy. "So," she said, brushing invisible dust off her blazer, "you're the engineer." "Yes, ma'am," I said, offering a handshake. She didn't take it. Instead, she tilted her head and asked, "And what's your long-term plan, Logan?" I paused. "To start my own sustainable design firm in the next few years. I've been building toward it." She sipped her drink. Ambitious. Though civil engineering doesn't quite have the glamour factor." Natalie tried to cut in, but Claudia had already turned to someone else, dismissing me like a passing cloud. That was just the beginning. Over the months, I saw how deep her control ran. From what Natalie wore to how she spoke in public to what job she was allowed to pursue, Claudia had an opinion on everything. And not just an opinion, an expectation. I once watched her criticize Natalie's dinner order at a restaurant. "Pasta again?" she'd said. "You'll never fit into that dress you were eyeing." I looked at Natalie, waiting for her to snap back. She didn't. She just nodded and changed her order. Later, when I asked why she let it slide, Natalie just sighed. "It's not worth the war." But it was, even if she didn't know it yet. Because the longer we were together, the more I realized I wasn't just building a future with Natalie. I was building it under the shadow of a woman who didn't think I deserved her daughter in the first place. And that shadow was only going to grow darker. The first time I met Claudia James, I thought I was being interviewed for a job I didn't apply for. Natalie had warned me she could be a bit much, but I had no idea what I was walking into. We pulled up to her family's estate, a huge Spanish-style home tucked into the Del Mar Hills, all white stone and manicured hedges. Claudia greeted us at the door wearing a linen suit and pearls with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Her husband, David, stood slightly behind her, the human equivalent of background music, pleasant but silent. She led us to the patio where a table was already set. Champagne flutes, cloth napkins. I sat across from her, trying to be polite, but I felt like I was under a microscope. "So," Claudia began, "Natalie tells me you're a... what again?" "I'm a civil engineer," I replied. "I work in sustainable infrastructure. Right now, I'm part of a team designing stormwater systems for coastal towns." She nodded once, slowly. Not exactly glamorous, but I suppose it's stable." Before I could respond, she turned to Natalie. "And you're still working at that boutique, darling?" Natalie smiled tightly. "Yeah, part-time. I've also been building my portfolio for fashion school." Claudia sighed. "You're still chasing that sewing machine dream?" Natalie looked down. "It's not just sewing, Mom. It's design. You know that." Claudia waved a hand. "Right, design. But until that pays the bills, maybe focus on getting a promotion where you actually work." I sat there stunned. Natalie had told me her mother could be sharp, but this was beyond that. This was condescending, masked as concern. After dinner, I offered to help clean up, but Claudia declined. "No need. That's what staff is for." Then she leaned in slightly and added, "But thank you for offering. That says something about how you were raised." I wasn't sure if it was a compliment or another jab. As we were leaving, Claudia hugged Natalie but just gave me a stiff nod. "Drive safe," she said, then looked at Natalie and added, "And think seriously about your future. You deserve someone who can provide you options." In the car, Natalie was quiet. I wanted to say something, but I didn't know how to approach it without making her feel worse. "She's not always like that," Natalie finally said. "She's just particular, especially about my future." "I get that," I said, though I didn't, not really. "But the way she talks to you, it doesn't feel like concern. It feels like control." Natalie let out a short, sad laugh. "You're not wrong." Over the next few months, I saw how deep Claudia's control ran. Natalie had to check with her mother before taking a weekend trip with me. Claudia insisted on knowing where she was at all times. Even the apartment Natalie rented was one Claudia had chosen and paid for. Every time Natalie made a choice her mother didn't agree with, Claudia would bring up the sacrifices she'd made. The tuition she paid, the clothes, the opportunities. It was always implied, sometimes directly stated, that Natalie owed her, and that debt was never paid in full. Natalie once came over in a navy wrap dress that looked incredible on her. But when I complimented it, she sighed and said, "I have to change before I go home. My mom says this cut looks tacky." "Are you serious?" I asked. She nodded. "She thinks it sends the wrong message." "What message? That you have a sense of style?" Natalie gave a small smile, but her eyes were tired. I started realizing that Claudia didn't just influence Natalie's decisions. She dictated them. And Natalie, sweet as she was, had been taught not to fight back, to make things easier, to avoid conflict. "I just want peace," she told me one night as we sat on my couch. "But at what cost?" I asked. She didn't answer. I knew then that Claudia wasn't going to be just a difficult mother-in-law. She was a threat to our future. And unless Natalie learned to stand up to her, I wasn't just dating her. I was dating a system built to keep her small. But I loved her. I wanted to believe love was enough. So I kept going, hoping, waiting. And that was my first mistake. Despite the warning signs, I couldn't imagine my life without Natalie. She had this quiet brilliance to her, like she didn't even realize how extraordinary she was. Her sketches, her fabric samples, her ideas, they all had life. Whenever she talked about colors and cuts, her whole face lit up. I used to think, how could someone so full of vision not see how small her mother was trying to make her? I'd been saving for months, not just for a ring, but for our life together. I wasn't going to spend 10 grand on a rock just to impress Claudia James. That wasn't my style, and it wasn't Natalie's either. Instead, I found a local artisan in La Jolla who helped me design something personal. A white gold band with a subtle twist detail, like a ribbon of fabric, holding a single clear sapphire. Not a diamond, but something uniquely hers. Sapphire was her birthstone, and the setting mimicked a design from one of her old sketchbooks. It wasn't flashy, but it was meaningful. I planned the proposal around something simple and us. There was this spot near Torrey Pines State Reserve, overlooking the cliffs, where Natalie liked to sketch. We'd hiked there a dozen times, and she always said it was her thinking place. I packed a picnic. We hiked. We sat on the overlook, legs dangling above the Pacific. I waited until the breeze calmed and the sun was low in the sky, casting that golden light that makes everything look like a memory. Then I pulled out the ring box. "Natalie," I said, my voice shaking more than I expected. "I know life with your mom has never been easy, and I know loving me sometimes means navigating all her noise. But I love you, and I want to build something real with you, something we get to choose." Her eyes were already glassy. "Will you marry me?" She blinked fast, then nodded. "Yes." Oh my God, yes. We both laughed, and I slipped the ring on her finger. She looked at it like it was a treasure, turning her hand in the sunlight, smiling like she couldn't believe it was hers. For the next few days, we were floating. Natalie kept staring at her hand when she thought I wasn't looking. We talked about wedding ideas, something outdoors, near water, not too big. I finally exhaled, thinking maybe we could do this. Maybe Claudia would soften when she saw how serious we were. That illusion lasted exactly 4 days. Because that's when Natalie said, "My mom wants to see us. She said we should share the news in person." I hesitated. "Is that a good idea?" "She said she just wants to talk," Natalie replied, hopeful. "Maybe she'll come around if she sees how happy we are." I wanted to believe that, but deep down I knew better. "All right," I said, forcing a smile. "Let's do it." And just like that, I was walking back into the lion's den. Only this time, I was bringing the ring. And this time, I wouldn't walk out the same. The moment we stepped through the front door of Claudia's estate, I knew it was going to go badly. She was already standing in the living room, arms crossed, lips pursed in anticipation, like a queen waiting for her subjects to confess their crimes. David, her husband, gave us a quiet nod from the couch, the remote still in his hand like he hoped we wouldn't interrupt whatever golf tournament he was trying to disappear into. Natalie smiled nervously and held up her left hand. "We're engaged," she said softly, showing the ring. Claudia didn't smile. She didn't congratulate us. She didn't even blink. She walked over to Natalie like she was examining a suspicious object and grabbed her daughter's hand. Turning it left and right in the light, she frowned. "This is the ring?" she said, voice flat. Natalie hesitated. "Yes, isn't it beautiful?" Claudia didn't answer. She just kept looking at it like it was something she'd found in a vending machine. Finally, she let go of Natalie's hand and turned to me. "I suppose you're proud of this?" I bit the inside of my cheek. I designed it myself. It's unique. Natalie's birthstone, her design influences. She cut me off with a slight laugh. "Not a diamond, though, just a colored rock." "It's a sapphire," I said, trying to stay calm. "And Natalie loves it." Claudia looked back at her daughter. "Do you, Natalie?" Natalie blinked. "Of course I do." Claudia tilted her head. "Because you have to? Or because you actually believe this is an appropriate engagement ring?" "Mom," Natalie said, her voice sharpening. "That's enough." But Claudia was just getting started. "I'm just being honest," she said. "A ring is supposed to represent the future. Commitment, sacrifice, what does this say, that he couldn't even bother with tradition?" My jaw clenched. I didn't buy a status symbol. I bought a symbol of our relationship. Something meaningful. She raised an eyebrow. Meaningful or cheap? That's when she reached over to the side table where Natalie had just set her purse and the ring box. She picked it up, flipped it open, and stared at it again like she expected it to suddenly change. Then, without warning, she tossed it back down onto the table with a sharp clack. "If this is the best you can do," she said coldly, then maybe you're not ready to marry my daughter. Natalie gasped. Mom! No, Natalie, Claudia said, turning to her. This is serious. Marriage is serious. You're not just marrying a man, you're marrying his future, his finances, his ability to provide. If he can't buy you a proper ring, how do you expect him to support a family? That was it. I stood up, my hands shaking, not from fear, but from pure anger. I love your daughter, I said, my voice low but steady. And I want to build a life with her. But I'm not going to let you insult me or her like this. Claudia folded her arms. Then prove you're worthy. Natalie turned to me, eyes wide, silently begging me not to escalate. I looked at her. And that's when it hit me. She wasn't saying anything. She wasn't defending me. She wasn't calling out her mom. She was frozen, like she always was when Claudia attacked. I looked back at Claudia. I don't need to prove anything to you. I proposed to Natalie, not you. Claudia smirked. And yet here you are, still seeking my approval. I turned to Natalie again. Say something, I said. She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Do you think this ring is cheap? Do you think I'm not enough? No, she said quickly. It's not that. Then why are you letting her speak for you? I asked. She looked down. I just don't want to fight. I took a long breath. I can't fight her and be in a relationship with you, Natalie. I need to know you're with me. Silence. Claudia, smug, stepped between us. If you really care about her, you'll understand that she deserves more than sentiment. She deserves a future. I stared at her. Then I looked at Natalie one last time. I'll see myself out. The ride home was a blur. Natalie tried to call, but I didn't pick up. That night, I sat on my bed, the empty ring box on my dresser, wondering how love could feel so powerless in the face of silence. And for the first time, I started to wonder, was I marrying her or marrying her mother? The days that followed felt like walking through fog. Natalie and I barely spoke. When we did, it was clipped. Awkward, like strangers trying to remember how to talk after something irreversible. She texted a few times. Mom was out of line. I'm sorry about how it went down, and I'll talk to her. But nothing ever came from those promises. No real conversation, no effort to make it right. A week later, I came home from work and found her sitting on my couch, eyes puffy like she'd been crying. She thinks I should stay with her for a while, she said quietly, staring at her hands. I already knew who she was. Your mom? I asked, trying not to sound bitter. Natalie nodded. Just for a few days. She says we need space to clear our heads. Space. That word felt like a chisel cracking everything we'd built. Do you think we need space? I asked. Danged. She hesitated. I don't know. Things have been so tense, and I can't deal with all of this at once. You mean her outbursts, her insults? That was never our tension, Natalie. That was her making everything about control. She didn't answer. The next day, she packed a small bag and left. She texted later that evening. She's being nice, no more comments about the ring. I didn't believe that for a second. Claudia wasn't built to let things go. She was the type to hold grudges like heirlooms. Within a few days, Natalie's messages grew shorter, colder. When I asked how she was doing, she said things like, Mom just wants to make sure I'm thinking clearly, or she's helping me reflect on the future. The Natalie I knew was slipping away. Not because she didn't love me, but because she'd never learned how to stand on her own. Then came the call. Adam, she said, voice barely above a whisper. My mom thinks we should take a break. Just to breathe. To see things more clearly. I laughed, but it came out wrong. Dry. Empty. Let me guess. She said you're making a mistake by being with someone like me? She didn't say it like that, Natalie replied. No, she never says it. She plants it. She spins it so you think it's your own idea. I need time to think. To think, I repeated. To think about what? Whether you're marrying me or marrying the idea she approved? She didn't respond. After that, the silence stretched. We didn't talk for days. Then a friend of ours, Serena, who was closer to Natalie, called. "You need to know," she said. "Claudia's trying to set her up with someone else." I froze. "What are you talking about?" "Some guy from one of her charity boards? Mid-40s, owns property in Aspen. Total trophy husband material. Claudia's obsessed." "Is Natalie going along with it?" "She told her she didn't want to meet him. But Claudia's still pushing. You know how she is." I hung up. Heart pounding. It wasn't just that Claudia was sabotaging us. It was that Natalie wasn't stopping her. A few nights later, Natalie called again. "I don't know what I'm doing anymore," she said. "I keep hearing her voice in my head telling me what's smart, what's right, and then I hear yours telling me to choose for myself. And I just feel torn in half." "I get that," I said quietly. "But Natalie, the difference is, my voice is asking you to choose. Hers is telling you you're wrong unless you obey." She sniffled. "I'm scared." "You should be. Because if you keep living for her, you'll wake up one day and realize you don't even know who you are." She went silent. "Grace," I said gently, "I love you, but I can't keep waiting for you to figure out if you're ready to have your own life. I just need a little more time." "You can take all the time you need," I said, "but I'm not going to stay in limbo while your mother decides whether I'm good enough for you." When we hung up, it didn't feel like a fight. It felt like the end of something we both wanted to save, but neither of us knew how. And it wasn't Claudia who broke us. It was the silence Natalie filled by letting her mother speak in her place. A week later, I got a text from Natalie. "Can we talk tonight? Mom thinks we should all sit down and figure this out." I stared at the screen. Mom thinks. I didn't even need to ask who initiated it. The nerve of Claudia to orchestrate a sit-down like this was almost impressive. Almost. I didn't reply right away. I went for a walk, cleared my head, came home, and then sent back, "This isn't about your mom. It's about us. But fine. I'll come. I have things I need to say." When I pulled into their circular driveway, my chest felt tight. Not from fear, from resolve. I wasn't going to let Claudia twist this into another one of her performances. Natalie opened the door before I rang the bell. Her eyes were tired, makeup smudged like she'd either cried or hadn't slept. "Thanks for coming," she said. I walked past her into the house. The living room looked like it had been staged. Every pillow in place, a tray of untouched tea and biscuits on the glass table. Claudia sat like she owned the property and the people in it. David was beside her, predictably mute, looking like he wanted to sink into the couch and disappear. Natalie sat beside her mother instead of beside me. That told me everything I needed to know before a single word was said. I took the chair across from them, like I was here for a job interview I had already failed. Claudia was the first to speak. "Adam, I appreciate you being willing to talk. These past few weeks have been confusing for Natalie, and we all want what's best for her." I clenched my jaw. "That's funny, because the last time we spoke, you threw the ring I gave her across the table and called me cheap." She didn't even blink. I was being honest. A man who wants to marry my daughter should be able to show he can provide. "I'm not marrying you," I said calmly. "I don't need your approval, and I sure as hell don't need your permission to love her." Claudia folded her hands like she was preparing to lecture a child. "You may think love is enough, Adam, but marriage is about more than feelings. It's about compatibility, lifestyle, sacrifice." "Sacrifice?" I repeated. "Like giving up your own voice just to keep a parent happy?" Natalie flinched. "Let's not make this personal," Claudia said sharply. "It is personal," I snapped. "Because every time I tried to talk to Natalie about our future, you inserted yourself. And every time you insulted me, she said nothing." I turned to Natalie. "I need to know where you stand. Not her. Not David. You." She opened her mouth, but Claudia cut in. "She's confused. She needs time. You pushing her to choose—" "Stop," I said, louder than I meant to. "Stop talking for her. You've done that her whole life. This is her decision." Claudia's nostrils flared. "Don't you dare come into my house and—" "I didn't come into your house," I interrupted. I came into your prison. You just decorated it with designer chairs and passive-aggressive remarks. The room went still. Even David blinked like he wasn't sure whether to speak or run. Finally, I looked at Natalie. Her hands were in her lap, clenched. She wasn't crying, but she looked like someone holding in a storm. Natalie, I said, my voice softer now. I love you, but I can't fight your mother every day for the rest of my life. I need to know you'll stand next to me, not behind her. She looked up at me, and in a voice barely louder than a whisper, she said, I don't know. That broke me more than any insult Claudia could have thrown. You don't know, I repeated. After everything we've been through? Natalie looked down again. Claudia stood like she'd just won a chess match. Then I think we're done here. I stood too. You're right. I turned to Natalie one last time. I would have done anything for you, but I won't lose myself just to stay in your life. And then I walked out. No shouting, no slamming doors, just silence, the kind that feels like closing the book, not just the chapter. I didn't sleep much that night. My phone buzzed once around 2 a.m. Natalie's name on the screen. I didn't answer. Her voicemail was short, her voice unsteady. I'm sorry, I didn't know what to say. I didn't want to hurt you, but I didn't want to fight her either. I'll figure it out. I just need time. I sat in the dark listening to it twice. The old me would have called her back, told her we could work through it. But not this time. The next day, I returned the ring to the artisan who made it. She looked surprised. Changed your mind? She asked gently. No, I said. She just didn't have the strength to make up hers. For the next few weeks, I stayed busy. Work, gym, meals alone. I didn't tell many people what happened. The ones who mattered already knew. Then, out of nowhere, I got a call from Serena, our mutual friend. You're not going to believe this, she said. Claudia kicked Natalie out. I paused. What? She stood her ground about not going on that date Claudia set up. Told her she wasn't interested. Claudia lost it. Said if she didn't want to listen, she could find somewhere else to live. I sat there in stunned silence. She actually followed through? Yep, Serena said. Natalie packed a suitcase and moved into some tiny studio downtown. She's couch surfing until she finds a job. Part of me wanted to rush to her, tell her to come stay with me, but I didn't. Not because I didn't care, because I finally realized I couldn't fix this for her. She had to choose her freedom, not just from her mother, but from needing someone else to pull her out. The next week, word got around that Claudia was telling people I abandoned Natalie, that I pressured her with a cheap ring, and that I blew up their family dynamic. Classic Claudia. Even when she lost, she had to make it look like she'd been wronged. But the thing was, I didn't care anymore. Let her talk. I had my peace. A few days later, Natalie texted. I got a part-time gig at a textile studio. It's not much, but it's something. I'm trying. I read it and smiled faintly. I could hear her voice in those words. Softer, real, a little scared, but finally hers. Then another message came through. I'm sorry I didn't stand up for you. I regret it every day. It stayed unread in my notification bar for hours, not because I was angry, because I knew what she really needed wasn't forgiveness. It was to learn that choosing herself didn't mean choosing me. That night, I replied, I'm proud of you for finally taking back your life. Keep going. She didn't respond, and I didn't expect her to. But I hoped, sincerely, that she'd keep walking forward, one painful, freeing step at a time. Months passed, not in a blur, but in long, quiet stretches where I started hearing my own voice again. I wasn't dating anyone seriously, but I was learning how to be alone without feeling lonely. I poured myself into work, picked up trail running again, even signed up for a night class in architectural drawing, something I'd always said I'd do someday. And then one afternoon, I bumped into Jared, my old buddy who introduced me to Natalie. We were grabbing coffee when he leaned in and said, Hey, did you hear about Claudia? I raised an eyebrow. No, what now? She's under investigation. Something about her charity board, misusing funds, hiding donations. A couple of her events got canceled. People are talking. I blinked. You're serious? He nodded. Dead serious. It's all over that neighborhood Facebook group she used to run like a throne. I didn't laugh. I didn't gloat. I just sat there, letting it settle in. Not because I was happy about her downfall, but because life has a funny way of circling back. The same woman who tried to control every move, every conversation, every person around her, was finally facing something she couldn't manage or manipulate. And Natalie? I hadn't seen her since that final text. But Serena mentioned once that she was still in that tiny studio apartment, now working full-time at a fashion co-op. Apparently, she'd even submitted her designs to an independent showcase. She's different now, Serena had said. Still soft-spoken, but she stands taller. That stuck with me. She stands taller. Maybe that's all I ever wanted for her in the first place. Not to choose me, just to choose herself. One evening, I found the old ring sketch I'd kept, a rough pencil outline from months ago, back when I thought meaning could shield us from everything else. I stared at it for a while, then folded it and tucked it into a notebook I now use for my own designs. Not every ending needs closure in the form of a final conversation. Sometimes closure is just the quiet understanding that you made the right call, even when it broke your heart. A few days ago, I walked past a boutique window and saw a mannequin wearing a jacket that looked exactly like one of Natalie's old sketches. I stopped, stared for a second, and smiled. I didn't go inside. I didn't ask if it was hers. I didn't need to. Because I knew. She made it, on her own. And so did I. And that's the kind of peace Claudia James will never understand.